I trust you're seeing here that we are praying, and I have prayed about this for a long, long time, that you will be able to discern yourself when you're moving in a biblical direction and when you hear of ideas out there, and ideas are a dime a dozen, where in fact, I've been in board meetings where they come with off-the-wall ideas of how we should go about doing fund development, either in Campus Crusade or other places. And you've got to be able to check those ideas and that spontaneous flow against some things that you want to live with long term. And the reason we've spent so much time in the stewardship side and even introducing you this morning to these biblical examples is that you've got to develop in your own lifestyle a screen to say that is within the realm and within the alignment of how it was done in the Scripture. And when you hear things off the wall, check it. Because a lot of times you're going to find, oops, what a disaster that could be. What we want to do here on this particular page, I think it's page 33 in your notebook, and we're going to keep right on moving and get you through this section. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. Jim and I went over it last night while watching the Republican convention stuff, and we had a good time. In fact, part of it we put on mute and ignored those guys on there. It was really fun. What we want to do here is we look at the old way and the new way. Is there contrasting ways that we approach fund development? One side is primarily how the world raises money. The side you see there in your notes, it says it's transactional fundraising. It's a deal. Secular people make deals. You come to an auction. That's a deal. I've got something for you. We're going to raise the ante, sell it for $1 million. You get a jet airplane, you can fly it. Were you really giving to the cause, or are you giving to the good deal to get the airplane? Same way with golf-a-thons and marathons and all these kind of things that organizations use. There's nothing unspiritual in transactional activity, but it's often slower and it is not often connected to the cause. One part of Campus Crusade that I'm very familiar with has been doing very good in a golf-a-thon type approach. The issue that they run into is by the time you play 100 holes in a day or do whatever you do all day long, you're so exhausted that when the content of the mission comes up, they have checked out. In fact, many of them leave and never show up. They played golf, they had a great time, they gave their money, but they don't even know who they gave it to because last weekend they were playing for another cause. Nothing's wrong with that approach, but if you ask the person that was playing, what exactly was the mission that you were playing for today, they would be probably very confused. And give them 3 weeks out after that's over, all they know is they play golf every weekend for another cause. Now, as we look at transactional activity, it's probably going to go slower than we would like it to go. And there's probably questions at times about the ethics of that particular tactic. So some of these things that we look at, we're going to think, oh, we don't want to do that at all. Other things we get ourselves caught in, and that's the way we're doing things. The intention of walking through these words and these contrasts that you're going to see here today is to simply help you get on the side that you prefer to be. So with that knowledge, you're more intentional in driving your program toward a direction that you're going to have outcomes that you're happy with. When I first developed this particular presentation, probably in the mid-90s, leaders of the ministry of Campus Crusade that started seeing it says that is like light, that's like shades going up in a dark room on a bright day. They didn't realize that they were violating and living in a transactional world when they really thought they were working on a transformational world. And so I'm just praying that as you use this, and this is an excellent tool for you to use in leadership if you're working on behalf of somebody else. Your leader is the country director or your leader is a ministry director. We need to help them process the difference so they stay in alignment with biblical solid foundation, not take you down a road that leads you in the opposite direction. Jim and I have a good friend that was with Campus Crusade for Christ, moved into some secular fundraising, and has done very well in the last 5 to 6 years in a development role with other organizations. And his greatest frustration is knowing what to do right, and the leadership of the institution today continues to take him down weird tracks to get the task done quicker. In Campus Crusade, we've often used the word, we need breakthroughs that are faster. You don't need breakthroughs that are faster because, as we're going to be looking a little bit later on definitions, development itself means steps and stages in growth and advancement. It's going to take you a while to get there. I had a real challenging little experience this last weekend. I needed to get to Florida from California. I had a little hurricane between California and Florida. I knew where I wanted to be, and I worked out 3 different options of getting here. I was thinking all the time I should call Mike Duggins and tell him what I'm up to here because I've got to end up there. This was one of those cases where I couldn't call and say I can't make it. So I had a trip to Chicago, and I had a trip to Denver, and I had a trip to Atlanta, all picked. I didn't like the prices, but I was covering my options to get where I need to be. I was fortunate enough to take the original plan that I made 8 weeks ago to get here. and I left the other plans behind because I had to know where I was going. And you've got to make those kind of adjustments, but these words are going to help you get there. So what we're going to do this morning, I'm going to walk you through a number of different words in these terms. And some of these I'm going to be asking you. On the screen, you've got the words conventional and biblical. On your notes, you've got transactional and transformational. And I just haven't changed the slides to match those, but you see the different point here. Let's look at those particular words. Okay, that is conventional, that is transactional. Your goal is to get money. What you need to be looking at is what do I do long term to have optimal philanthropy working here. Now that word of philanthropy is really just talking about obedience in some respect and helping a person know what he's supposed to be doing with his resources. So it's a relational side that you're moving toward here versus a where is the money side issue here. You see the difference? And one side is just where most of the world thinks of this way. 90% of direct mail that you get around the United States talks about we're desperate, please help, we've got to do something X now. Okay, very little of that direct mail talks about this other approach. Now sometimes in a letter you've got to say, what can I say in a page and a half? But I'm just saying there's a difference here. How about this one? When you see the word problems, and in contrast that word with the word possibilities. A few years ago, in fact it was a long time ago, but there was a guy leading the development office at Campus Crusade for Christ, and we had a massive fire at Arrowhead Springs. And he came to me about 4 months later and he says, we need a fire about once a year. Because we raised lots of money as a result of the fire. Because that was a problem. And what we moved to there was the problem really wasn't around the mission, it was around a new bridge across the creek. It was issues that we had to deal with. So much of fundraising today is centered only on the problem, and so we have another term here that we have problem-driven. People are looking for a problem to solve, and they do not go out working on the opposite side of that. And look at the opposite side. Think about this. Instead of problem-driven, it's vision-led. And we want you to start thinking about how do you cast the vision for what it could look like rather than the desperation that we feel today. You can get small people to get tokens on problem-driven issues. You do not get significant gifts on problem-driven issues. You know why? Major stewards run from problems. When they sense you're in a problem, they'll let you have your problem. They are thinking vision-led. One of the geniuses of the History's Handful concept, and there's a lot of hiccups in the History's Handful concept. I've lived with it for 20 plus years. But one of the visions was it was big enough that it challenged a person's mind to do something he had never or she had never thought about doing before. What are you putting in front of your people that is actually going to change the world? And the more they comprehend that, and we'll get into how they process that in a little bit, the more they're likely to land at. Okay, how about this one here? This is kind of a fun one. Money or meaning? When we talk about money, it's that get up, catch up, get by, get it into my account, solve my problem. Frankly, the partners care less about your problem. They're looking for personal meaning in life. And if you don't connect with the meanings that are meaningful to them, you may get a token, but you will not get their meaningful connection. People will sometimes pay you to leave their home just to get you out of the way. That's part of the deal. You were after money, you got money. Let's don't think about how we're raising money, but how we're stimulating meaning in the people's lives. That's what we're working on. And as we unpack more and more of our suitcases here, we're trying to help you connect how you can do these kind of things, okay? How about this one? Organization wants to get something. And this is major out there as I work with a lot of other groups. You know, don't waste your time telling me how to go about doing this. Just show me how to get the money. I need to get something out of this deal. But think about this one. And this is a word here. In our definitions, we're going to come back. I don't like the word donor. It shows up here. I hate the word donor. I tried to erase it in the early 80s, and I was on a soapbox to remove donor from the language. And it's an industry term that I can't get rid of. But I don't like a donor. It's a person that gets stuck with a needle and ends up with a sugar cube. But this person that we're talking about, this partner of ours, wants to do something. You see the difference there? What does Campus Crusade for Christ want to do versus what does this partner want to see accomplished? And our liability in Campus Crusade is that we want to go tell our story, and we are good at telling our story. But sometimes our story doesn't connect to what they want to do. And if you're not very careful, you've got to do a lot more thinking and listening on this side before you start to articulate our story. Nothing wrong in having a good story. We're going to talk about how you create the good story. But frankly, there's very few people that want to hear your story, and they feel abused if you come in selling your story before you connect with them who have a meaning and a vision to accomplish something. And the words in their mind is, you don't really care much about me, you're just caring about your thing. But that is what transactional fundraising does, is I've got a little time with you, we're good friends, would you give me $10,000 for this cause that I'm raising money for? You know, that's the kind of thing. The organization wants to get something. The kind of an organization the professionals want. We want a good income stream. We want to see our charts go up every month. We want to have a good, what they call ROI in our industry, rate of return on the investment. We look at all those kind of things. But this is the kind of an organization the professional wants. We need to think about the kind of the world that our donor, our partner wants. So as we engage, and this is the interesting thing, we have roughly 25,000 staff members, I hear. The number hasn't changed much. It stays static. I think we just don't know what to do to increase the number worldwide. And then they say we've got about 200,000 engaged volunteers. And I'm saying somebody is disconnected because we have ministry partners in excess of 500,000 people. What is the kind of a world that those 500,000 people that are supporting our ministry want? We are there to invite them to participate as partners, not as something out there to be manipulated. And the kind of an organization the professional wants is keep everybody happy, keep everybody quiet, let's have no problems, and let's keep the ROI high enough, and we'll fire people and hire people to keep that ROI up. Typical organizations are looking in a very cutthroat way at this side. And very few organizations are saying, what is the kind of world that our partners want to see become reality? Because we're serving stewards over here. We're simply operating a system over here. See the difference? We're going to take on another one of these kind of things. Tell the organization story. It kind of relates a little bit to what we were just talking about, about what the organization wants to say. A few years ago, in a ministry situation, there were 3 major leaders that went in to see one particular person. Now, the fellow had said, I've got 20 minutes to see you. It was a new contact for the ministry. 3 leaders went into the meeting and sat for 10 minutes waiting for this guy to finish another meeting. They were feeling pressed that the time was running short. And they dove right into telling the organization story. Because he said, well, why are you here? I'd like to hear about what you're doing. All the right platitudes and words came out of the person that was being visited's mind. And they dove in and they started telling the story. A person that I knew in that room was looking around the room and had this sickening feeling that this process was sinking fast as the declaration of our ministry articulation was going on. Because he saw on the walls and in this particular person's office that what was being said was in direct conflict with what this person believed. Plaques, pictures, school he attended, all kinds of things. The ministry never got anywhere in that conversation because they were telling their organization's story, but they were not listening to the partner's story. If they had spent 10 minutes of the 20 they had listening, they would have turned the entire tables around. They ended up selling the direct opposite of what the person believed because they chose to go sell before they started to listen. And the ministry left probably $3 to $5 million on the table by making that fatal error. To this day, that guy is still frustrated about that visit because it never connected to his heart, and the audacity of this organization to come in and say what it said when he had convictions that were opposite. Was he really in opposition to us? Probably not. But some listening would have connected the hoses differently. And there would have been future dialogue that could have taken place, and the potential of $3 to $5 million could have been on the table. And it was taken off the table because the ministry chose to sell itself rather than listen to the person that they were talking to. Now, you can go out and sell. The answer is we had a good appointment. Did the good appointment bring us to the place where we had engagement and the donor, the partner, the steward was saying, thank you for coming? Well, I'm sure he said thank you. He took a lot of people into his office, but that's the word. How about this one? The professional is inquisitive. What does that term mean? Turn to your friend and see if you can define those 2 words. The professional, that's you. What do we mean when we see the word inquisitive? It's a new word to you. Okay? Strange words there. Professional is inquisitive. The professional is acquiring, is grasping, is hunting. It's almost like a hunting expedition. Not for moose at 4 a.m. in the morning or whatever the conditions may be, but it's a hunt. because this is a grasp, and what you're looking for where the professional is inquisitive. Tell me about you. Tell me about your family. Tell me how you went to that school. Tell me a little bit about this. And you'll think a lot of times as we unpack the suitcase further, I'm spending an awful lot of time just getting to know this person and not too much on mission. But when the inquisitive comes, it says to the person that's listening, you do care. I have a story. And when we are going in with an inquisitive spirit about the person, the partner we know, and learning about them, we save ourselves gobs of hardship down the way. If you learn in an inquisition that his first wife, the person you're talking to's wife died of cancer, and he talks about Joan, and then he talks about Carol. And if you can't sort out between Joan and Carol, and the next time you see him, ask the wrong question about the wrong wife, you're in trouble. And that happens gobs and gobs of times. When a person tells you who they are and what they're like, do everything you can to change your database so you'll never make a mistake. Because inquisition side is going to tell you all kinds of things. Last Monday, we got a letter from the National Republican Convention that tells you where I am politically, I guess. It was to Dear, and it was offering me a credit card. The credit card name would have been L-A-W, and then the W was in my name, L-A-W, that was my name. And I have a middle name called Wayne, and my last name was Nan, N-A-N. Now, my wife and I, in fact, she said, I wrote them again, and I said to them, when you get my name spelled right, I will start giving you money. And for a decade, we have wrestled with the National Republican Convention about our name because in their database, I'm in the N's because their computer doesn't like apostrophes. Okay? They do not have a relationship with Larry Nan or Lar Nan, and I don't want a credit card with Lar Nan on it. I would like to have it with Larry Nan, Onan. I want my name there. That's all I want. Now, what we're getting at here is that they've had a number of opportunities over the last decade. I'm wondering how in the world does their database really work? Somebody's got a key punch and fix me. Because they've been inquisitive, they ask me all kinds of questions, I fill out forms for them, I do all kinds of things, and they are ignoring the most personal thing I've got because they are not using the data they got. So as you are inquisitive, now start to use the resources that God's given you there. That's what we're getting at here. The other side of that coin, the inquisitive person says, I really care less if it's Carol or Joan, and I really care less if your last name is X, I'm after money. And that's what I'm being. I'm abused Republican right now. I'm not happy in my relationship with that organization. And I haven't sent a gift yet. My wife said last night after hearing this little presentation on television, we need to send something. I'm thinking, which account do I want to send it to? Nan? Oh, Nan. Because I've got all these pieces of mail over periods of time that have totally messed me up. It's more my resistance right now because they don't treat me right than it is the cause that they represent. Okay, so that's what we're getting at. See the differences here? You just got to decide where you're going to be. Donor is reactive. I've had staff members say in the past years when I would do faith promise presentations, they would see me coming and they would grab their wallet because they knew I was after something. And I did presentations for a number of years like that. So they would hold onto their wallet so they wouldn't lose anything out of the deal. The reactiveness side is the transaction is, you want something, I don't know if I want to give it to you. You want an appointment, I don't know if I want to listen to you. It's that kind of a thing. What you're looking for and praying for is where that partner is proactive. When can you come? I've been hoping you would call. Could you come by so we can talk? I've got another idea. The proactiveness is now managing you rather than you managing them. Because now you are servicing a steward that's got a new idea. And sometimes you've got to politely tell them that is not going to work or we can't do it at this particular time. That's okay because that partner wants to be engaged. But over here on this side, almost inevitably, if you get a call about a golf tournament, you know you're in conflict with a family outing 3 weeks from now when they want you to play. And you start to be reactive. And you've been in those situations yourself. When you get telemarketing calls and you've told them before you don't want telemarketing calls, you are reactive not only to the telemarketer, but you're reactive to the organization that had them call in the first place. It is just a matter of how we position ourselves here. How about this one? Good one. What do we mean by scarcity of resources? Just talk to your partner about that a minute. What do you think of when you see the term scarcity of resources? Now tell me, without even the mic being passed around, what are some of the thoughts come to your mind when you see that term? Just anybody, just speak out a word or a victim mentality. Competition. Low expectations. A limited amount. A few years ago, we had an executive director for the Lake Hart project here in Orlando. And he was really struggling with scarcity of resource mentality. And I happened to have a chance to walk with him one time about this particular principle, and it changed his entire life about this project. The scarcity of resources mentality says, I've got to get to that guy first. He could run out of money. The well is almost out. And I dare not share him with anybody else in the universe because he might give to somebody else and then not give to me. That's the scarcity of resources mentality, is there's a limited amount in God's provision, and if he gives it to me, there may be no more left. The abundance of mentality just switches that entirely around. Here is a steward that God has blessed. Let him or her make the decision on what abundance is, not me. Okay? And the abundance mentality says there's enough for Lake Hart, and there's enough for Jesus Film, and there's enough for IT expansion, and there's enough for military ministry. Let the person that's the steward make those decisions, not the manipulator on the other side that is trying to control this situation. Now, as a result of that scarcity of resources mentality, we in Campus Crusade for Christ have built silos around each other. We don't want people to know other donors. We have a long history, a tradition, that you can get to your partners, but you can't get to somebody else's partners. Our entire database is built around some of those thoughts. The future is going to be different. It's going to be a lot more shared logic out there because we need to collaborate so that we can see abundance, not keep it in scarcity of resources mentality. It really freed up my friend here that was running on Lake Hart when he thought, everybody I talk to about Lake Hart could give to anything else, and if they feel led to give to something else, I'm free of that. That's God's problem. God's going to fund Lake Hart. God's going to fund the rest of the ministry. And he became abundant in his encouraging of people to look at the ministry rather than trying to raise money for a building project. Radical switch in his mind. And the rest of his life, in his tenure working with Campus Crusade, building this property, gave him freedom to go to bed at night and sleep at peace because God's people had enough money to fund whatever has to be funded. In our broken world, people get overwhelmed. I would agree with that. And I think that's probably where people feel like I just get so many appeals I don't want to do with them. They think they get far more from Campus Crusade than they get. I'm very familiar with what people can and cannot get, and there's no way that some people can get the mail that they are convinced they get. We don't do those kind of things. And plus they look at that mail, plus they look at InterVarsity mail, and they add it all together, and pretty soon their post office is busy all the time delivering opportunities. Probably in some people they're saying, my choice is to give over here. It's not about volume of giving. It's not about this person having an unlimited tank over here in his bank account where he pumps it out. But it's a mentality that God is going to supply, and if he wants me to give over here, he's going to supply that. Probably there is some balance there, but I think when we probably fail thinking I've got to protect my ministry. I was on the phone just a week or so ago with one part of Campus Crusade, and I was asking about a project to go see some of their partners about a particular thing that the corporate is needing to raise. And the first response was, I don't think you better go to X. They've already made their decision to do something else. Okay, and that is, it is not because the person was advising me that. He had heard that they did not want their partners to be notified and informed of something we were doing corporately. And I feel like we need to sometimes honor the partner's decision-making process. I'm not saying we rush out and end run everybody and play all kinds of games. That's not what the thought is here. But look at it that God is that provider for you. He's got an abundance of it. Sometimes we think, I've seen everybody I could possibly see. I remember the first year I raised support, I went to see the #1 top donor in my community that was going to fund my ministry. And he was from a theological persuasion that he told me, and I saw him on the second day I was working on my support. And he said, there's no way, unless you agree with me theology, I'm going to put a dime into your pocket. And I left there thinking, that was 90% of my money right there. But his theological persuasion, he was using theology as a wedge, as a bat over my head. And I walked away saying, God, it's not going to come from here, and I'm not going back. Where is it going to come from? And I was able to look at the abundance of what God had provided, and I wasn't worried about one person's theological upside downside. Balance is in a lot of these words, I think. You know, there's not a sinful side and a spiritual side so much as one moves slower than the other side. But I think what I'm encouraging you to do is think more about how can I be abundant, but also how can I serve the people correctly and not just put their name out to the wolves. I mean, there's a spirit there that says, I turn you loose, I'm going to publish your name in the Orlando Sun that you're available to give money without permission. Okay, that would be abundance mentality. You know he's got it, but boy, have you offended the process. Extremes. Critical thinking. What could go wrong? Generative thinking is what could happen if we do it right. That's what we're looking for. And we're looking for that collaboration. A few more words that we've got there. Incremental advances. There is an element here. This is one of those other ones that are kind of balanced. But over one side is, I got 5, I can get to 10. I get to 10, I get to 20. I get to 20, I get to 25. On the biblical side, you could be looking for unprecedented breakthroughs. And you will experience those as God does some amazing things in stewards' lives. And I watched the major donor reports that come out in the ministry of Campus Crusade, and we have one friend that gave us significant dollars many years ago, and then he dried up. He and his wife have given 5 cents, maybe 5,000 in a decade. And then all of a sudden, a huge gift shows up again. But I remember the conversation back in the early 90s about what his heart was. But we were too anxious for his heart to wait, and we kind of moved on. And so we've not been in the process of relating to him as much lately, but all of a sudden, the breakthrough comes again. Let's just be expecting God to do this, but let's not walk along this path here. Often, and happens too often in Campus Crusade, a major mega donor starts at $300 to $500 special gift. There are story after story of small gifts that grew to larger gifts, that grew to larger ones. I remember one, the guy told me, frankly, I gave her $500 to get her out of town, a staff member. She was spending too much time with my wife. And I figured if I gave her $500, that would get her on the road to her assignment. 3 years later, they'd invested a little bit more, and they'd picked up a couple more staff members, and suddenly they were giving around $5,000 a year to Campus Crusade. A year later, that turned into a $100,000 check out of their personal checkbook at a weekend event where he heard the Great Commission and the Holy Spirit message when Bill spoke. And about 2 years later, he was cash flowing $3 to $5 million a year for much of the 90s. Now, he's not doing that today. Circumstances have changed. He feels badly that he can probably only hit about $1 million a year right now. But the conditions have changed in his life. But he said, I'll never, ever be able to experience sacrificial giving the way God has blessed us. I don't understand that. All I can do is give out of my abundance of what God's already given to us. But it started by getting a staff member out of town to her assignment. That's incremental starts. But it took 3 years before we saw the unprecedented breakthrough when the right kind of spiritual message touched his heart. And you've got to wait for those things to happen. We'll keep on moving here because time's going to raise out. This word's resistance. Oh dear, here you're coming. Over here is energy. And you will feel the difference. When you know you're in a transactional thing and they feel like you are, I really want to keep my hands folded. And over here, it's how much can we talk? What can we do? How can I help? Where's it coming from? See the differences? All we're doing, look at a contrast. Cultivation, a good word. We're going to talk about it. Collaboration's a better word. Working together. Cultivation is like me taking care of my garden. We're going to have a session tomorrow morning on cultivation. In that cultivation, I'm praying that you will learn to collaborate and treat the person not as a plant, but as an equal steward. Because we can start thinking about all of our friends out there as simply plants, and we water them, and we hoe them, and we weed them, and we do this to them, but that's what they are, as a plant. That's what cultivation is in the extreme. Collaboration is saying, how can we do it together? Just see the contrast here. How about this one, coverage? How many people can we talk to versus what's the authentic involvement? Sometimes we've got to look at 15 or 20 people to accomplish a very big task. Other times we can go out to coverage and decide how many people we can ask to help a need in a particular situation like Katrina or whatever it might be. There's differences here in the approach you take. How about this one? The event itself is the ask. I've got to get in front of him so I can ask him. Over here, that event it's really a process of a lifelong relationship that moves us forward. It's one step to the next step to the next step. Not every time you see him, you're going to ask. I heard of a situation yesterday. We're in a particular room that was supported by a particular friend of the ministry. And yesterday a phone call was made to that particular partner that made this room possible to say, basically, I'm not calling you for a thing. I'm calling to tell you that we're using the room today. I got to go. That is a lifelong relationship that's being built. It's not about the equipment in here. It's not about the walls in here. It's about what is God putting on your heart. Self-centeredness. It's usually about me. It's usually about us as an organization rather than can we be volunteer-centered. This is about them. This is their ministry. It's not our ministry. We wouldn't exist without the volunteers. There's a new program that's being developed in Campus Crusade, and one of our visions for that program is to help in the next decade engage 10 million volunteers with the ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ. That's a lot of folks, but that's volunteer-centered. It's still going to have 25,000 staff, and we will move maybe 200,000 to 10 million. Can you imagine the difference could be happening when we shift gears and start to think, how can we help them engage? See the difference? Token gifts come off of this side. Well, I'll pay you $500 to play golf, or I'll give you $5 so you leave my office. I give you money to release my pain and my guilt. That's what that's basically about. Over here, it's full of meaning commitments, and full of meaning commitments take a little bit time to process rather than the token gifts. Is there anything unspiritual about tokens? No. I didn't say it was bad. I'm just saying if you're really wanting to engage in the process of stewardship, you're looking to say, how can I help that person do all that God wants him to do, not just how do I get a dollar out of him so I can get back on the bus and go home. And that just is a different mentality that comes there. Taught by admonitions, this is where you tell them what they should do. Over here, you're learning by example. Most of your partners learn by the examples of others. And the first example they look at is probably you as individuals who are coming to talk to them. It's very appropriate for them to say, what level of involvement do you have in this program? That's why we want you always to commit to the projects that you're funding, because we want you to speak from the heart, not from the paper. But it's learn by example. It's other people that are joining you in that particular process. Half of the glass is half empty, you get that one. Glass is half full. That's just a different view things. Control fundraising costs. Well, don't worry too much about that one. You'll have other people do that for you, I'm sure. Invest to build equity. You see the difference here? This is how much can we cut out of the program to save money. This is how much we invest in the program to make the resources possible. It's a mentality you've got there. What we've done here is we've just shown you in a quick glance a picture of where I hope you would like to aspire to be in your development role. I don't want you to erase the left side and say it's all bad and I want to get away from it. I would like you to say, I would like to see the majority of our programs doing what happens over here, because it's going to make your life so much easier when you engage stewards rather than when you work the system.